I recently came across some fascinating details about the costumes in House of the Dragon, and I can't wait to share them with you. In this video, I'll be revealing 5 interesting facts you may not know about the show's wardrobe. But before we get started, a quick warning, there will be mild spoilers for HBO's House of the Dragon Seasons 1 and 2. Also, a big shout out to my patrons for their incredible support. Thank you. With that out of the way, let's get to the list. Number 5, the green versus black factions. In Season 2 of House of the Dragon, the divide between the two Targaryen factions, the Greens and the Blacks, becomes even more pronounced, and their costumes play a pivotal role in illustrating this split. According to Hypebeast, as the Hightower family remains in King's Landing and aligns with the Greens, the Targaryens relocate to Dragonstone, establishing themselves as the Blacks. Season 2 costume designer Caroline McCall explains how the visual distinction between the factions was central to the storytelling, with a focus on creating a unique identity for each side. In a recent podcast, McCall shared her approach. She said, "I really wanted Alicent and Rhaenyra to have very different silhouettes to reflect how their lives and trajectories have diverged from their earlier friendship." She built on the medieval European look that Season 1 costume designer Jenny Tamim established for King's Landing, a palette rich with green and gold for Alicent, Helena, and the court. The embroidery in King's Landing remains figurative and naturalistic, emphasizing a purely medieval aesthetic. Now, in contrast, the Blacks' relocation to Dragonstone brought an entirely different tone. Dragonstone's harsher climate and the legacy of Old Valyria inspired a palette of black, gray, and red. McCall wanted Rhaenyra and Rhaena to project the image of powerful Targaryen women. She expressed, "I wanted that strength and claim to power to be reflected in their clothing." The Blacks' jewelry and embroidery evolved to reflect a brutalist aesthetic that aligns with the architecture of Dragonstone and the ancient models of Old Valyria, standing in contrast to the finer, intricate designs of King's Landing. Their simpler yet bolder accessories convey their unique identity as the true heirs of the Targaryen legacy. Number 4, the houses are all well defined. In Season 1 of House of the Dragon, viewers are introduced to many of the great and lesser houses of Westeros through key group scenes such as the tourney, the swearing of fealty to Rhaenyra, and the wedding celebration. However, Season 2 expands the scope of the story, moving beyond King's Landing and Dragonstone to explore the broader world of Westeros. Showrunner Ryan Condal shared on his podcast that heraldry plays a significant role in Season 2, giving the audience a deeper sense of the world's vastness. This expansion isn't limited to the principal characters, it also includes secondary characters, armies, and houses. New colors and arms appear, requiring extensive research and thoughtful design. McCall discussed on Condal's podcast her meticulous process for defining the look of each house. At the outset, she conducted detailed research into armies and technologies that could feasibly exist within the fantasy world, grounding the costumes in realism. Now, this approach ensured that every design felt authentic and consistent with the world's logic. As with Game of Thrones, the design philosophy aimed to avoid overly fantastical elements that could alienate viewers. Instead, every choice was carefully rooted in historical and cultural inspiration, bolstered by practical considerations. For example, the Brackens and the Blackwoods fastened their cloaks with Celtic-inspired brooches, incorporating elements of Viking and Roman styles. The design team ranked the houses by wealth, allowing economic status to shape their appearance. Less affluent houses like House Darkland lacked access to full-plate armor and relied on historically accurate techniques such as sandwiching plates between layers of fabric. For the Darklands, a mix of custom pieces and rented items enhanced with chainmail and Moorish-inspired details achieved the desired look. Budget and time constraints were also key factors. The team strategically decided which items to custom make for future seasons, which to rent, and how to best use available sources. The Stokeworths costumes repurposed plate breastplates inherited from Game of Thrones, creating a new design around these existing elements. And in some cases, designs emerged from pure creative vision, while in others, they were driven by what was readily available. The process of outfitting armies required close collaboration with military design assistant Jason Gill. Together, the team assembled looks on stands, photographed them, and determined which elements needed to be manufactured. A significant amount of chainmail was custom-made, balancing creativity with practicality to bring the armies of Westeros to life. Number 3, no real fur is used. In the northern regions of Westeros, particularly Winterfell, fur pelts are a traditional garment for the Starks, serving both as a status symbol and, more importantly, as protection against the harsh cold. Game of Thrones costume designer Michelle Clapton explained, "The Starks have less available to them and are in different circumstances as they live in cold, damp weather. Available to them is wool, leather, fur, and some dyes." Now, when Game of Thrones first premiered in 2011, the use of real furs didn't draw much attention. However, as the series progressed, there was increasing pressure on designers to limit their use of fur whenever possible. Clapton mentioned that they made an effort not to use virgin fur, but opted for reclaimed fur instead. In many instances, like with Daenerys' white winter coat, they actually chose synthetics. While House of the Dragon focuses more on King's Landing and Dragonstone, which means fur isn't as prominent, it's worth noting that in 2024, only synthetic fur is acceptable. Condell mentioned on his podcast there was Furgate on set this year, which proved to be quite complicated. Now, while I'm usually up to date with Game of Thrones controversies like the infamous Boobgate, I hadn't heard of any issue with House of the Dragon until now. However, McCall added that showing fur on camera, even if it's secondhand, is strictly prohibited. However, fur byproducts such as lamb or goat shearling are permitted since they originate from the meat industry. But pelts similar to those worn in Game of Thrones are not allowed even if they already exist, and this restriction applies in all cases. Working with faux fur presents its own set of challenges. McCall noted that while there are many high-quality synthetic options available, they often look their best when pristine. Creating faux fur that appears aged and weathered is a much more difficult task. And I'll personally add that you can really see the difference between the real and faux fur when comparing the Stark's fur pelts in Game of Thrones to the flat, less dynamic fur collars worn by the Starks in House of the Dragon. Number 2, some casts choose not to wear animal products. While fur is a definite no-go in 2024, leather remains one of the most commonly used costume materials in medieval fantasy shows, including House of the Dragon. However, some actors who follow vegetarian or vegan lifestyles choose not to wear any animal products. In the podcast, McCall shared that Bethany Antonia, who plays Baela Targaryen, is vegan. The costume designer said, "Well, I've learned a lot. Everything that Bethany wears that looks like leather isn't leather." Now, this isn't new, though. The Game of Thrones costume team faced similar challenges. Peter Dinklage, who played Tyrion Lannister, for instance, was a vegetarian when he first started filming the HBO series and later became vegan. And while I can't confirm this, I think that his early doublets were made from animal skins, at least the first 3 seasons, while his later season doublets, belts, and footwear were made from synthetic materials. Given these trends, it's likely that future shows will move away from animal products altogether. Now, before we get to the number 1 item on this list, I have a bonus fact for you, but I also have a favor to ask. If you're enjoying this content, please take a moment to like this video so that I know that this is the kind of content that you would like to see more of. Bonus fact: the costume department created their own fabrics. In Season 2 of House of the Dragon, the costume team created unique garments from fabrics that couldn't be found in any London fabric shop. According to an article from Hypebeast, one standout innovation was their use of scaled fabric, which was actually a printed effect on velvet d'Avour, designed to look like scales. This approach made custom-printed fabrics and original designs a fundamental part of their strategy for the season. Now, I believe this special fabric was used for Rhaenyra's striking, scaly red full-length gown and her blue robe. I even mentioned in a previous video that the burned-out velvet with the scaly effect had a similar appearance. With the growing use of 3D printing and other modern technologies, it's likely we'll see more custom printed fabrics in the future. However, this technique isn't new to House of the Dragon. The Game of Thrones costume team also custom printed fabrics, such as Cersei's deep red velvet gown with golden lions, Joffrey's red doublet adorned with a gold dagger motif, and Cersei's black and gold kimono-style wrap gown featuring a dagger motif. And the number one item on this list is Kurosawa-influenced Rhaenyra and Daemon's wedding costumes. In the House of the Dragon Season 1 episode Driftmark, Rhaenyra and Daemon wear traditional Valyrian wedding attire for their ceremonial union. According to costume designer Jenny Tamim, creating these ensembles was particularly challenging. In the behind-the-scenes video, she explained that she couldn't outdo the grandeur of Rhaenyra's earlier wedding gown, so she turned to the history of old Valyria for inspiration. These costumes reflect a pre-Targaryen aesthetic, drawing from the kimono-like silhouettes of the dragon keepers introduced in the series' first episode. Tamim designed Rhaenyra and Daemon's outfits to mirror one another, emphasizing their connection. However, showrunner Ryan Condal added another layer to the story, revealing that Tamim also drew inspiration from Akira Kurosawa's 1985 film Ran, based upon Shakespeare's King Lear. Departing from her usual historical references, he said that Tamim surprised Condal by presenting an image from the film. He was struck by the cinematic choice and appreciated its fresh perspective. This samurai-inspired influence carries into Season 2. Condal noted there's a bit of a samurai feeling, especially in Rhaenyra's dragon riding costume, as the series develops. You see her getting more and more entrenched in their clans on either side, for lack of a better term. And I'll add that Kurosawa was also a major influence on George Lucas when creating the Star Wars universe. With House of the Dragon likely on hold until 2026, we're entering a serious Westeros drought. But fear not, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms premieres on June 15, 2025, and I'll have plenty of coverage on that show, along with more House of the Dragon content to keep the excitement alive. A huge thank you to my patrons for making this video possible, and to all of you for spending time with me. I'll see you all in the next video.